Hi, and welcome to the Your Story Studios podcast, a podcast where we talk about all things content creation. And today on the show, I'm joined by Steve, and today we are going to be talking about animation. Steve, tell me about your animation journey.
Animation journey. So I was working in a role. First of all, I'd been working in video production for, probably, 7, 8 years. And I'd never really done any kind of animation. I started in a role that was predominantly video production, but then there was one thing that I had to do every week, which required a little bit of animation work in After Effects in a project that had already been created. And it did not go well. Every single week I had problems.
Is that user error or it was the computer's fault?
It was certainly not the computer's fault. I know what it was now. It was the importance of structuring your After Effects project in a way that it's easy to use, which this project was not. It was an absolute mess and stuff everywhere, and I didn't know how to use After Effects. In saying that, I did learn a few little things, about there is some things that you're like, oh, okay, that's easy to understand. So after that, when I went back to freelancing for the fourth or fifth time, I don't know, I started doing a little bit of animation, really basic stuff, just, teaching myself. Not a lot though. And then enter COVID and all my work was gone. So I was really lucky I applied for a role that popped up and was lucky enough to get it at a company doing online education. And they were looking for someone who had, really great video production, video editing skills and animation. And I entered the interview being like, I've got a lot of video post-production skills, editing skills, not a lot of animation skills. But I think that they were so impressed with my show reel that they were willing to take a chance on me. They were really encouraging of learning and upskilling people. So they went ahead. And yeah, from there, my first project was face to camera. I think it was 7 episodes teaching people about AWS's Deep Composer keyboard and generative AI software that they had developed. So, quite technical. I was sort of like, and a lot of it was animation, face to camera stuff, but then animation to explain how generative AI works, and the different processes from playing a tune on the keyboard to creating a whole song from that tune. I opted to pitch an idea where we do all the animation in 8-bit style, which everyone loved. And then I learned how to create imagery in Illustrator to look like 8-bit. I was kind of like, I'll pitch something and then learn how to do it later, and it was like pandemic, I'm at home, and got to do something to pass the time. And my manager sat down with me. He always made time every week if I needed help, which I did to begin with, and he sort of started running through a lot of the basic fundamental stuff with me. But that project, there was only a few kind of comps throughout that project that were quite complex. For the most part, it was like pretty basic, animation things. So that kind of really laid a nice foundation for me. The job went on, more projects, more work, more projects. From that point, 12 months later, fully animated 7-episode web series about programming languages for the cloud. Even I was shocked that I'd learnt so much in 12 months. It was a really rapid learning curve, but I kind of was like, I think I should have been doing animation all along. I feel like I should have, maybe tried to learn it really early on in my career, but circumstances and whatnot, I didn't. But here we are now.
Yeah. So just going back, you mentioned that you made the animations in Illustrator. So that animation project that you were talking about, that's all done from scratch, or were there templates that you were using, or purchased vectors from Shutterstock or stuff like that?
Yeah. So I was creating the assets in Illustrator and then bringing the Illustrator project into After Effects. That was for that project. There has been projects throughout my learning journey where I have used stock assets, all sorts of things. I think one thing that works in my favor is my ability to draw, both with my hand and in Illustrator, and a little bit Photoshop, but I'm definitely have more strength in Illustrator. So I like to, create the assets where I can. If there's not enough budget to, allocate for that, then we can turn to Envato or iStock or something like that. But, where possible, I like to create it. If the client wants something that potentially sits out of my wheelhouse and the budget's there, I might recommend bringing in a designer to work with. And that's great. I've done that before too, and it's a fun, interesting, new way of working. Which comes with its challenges as well sometimes. But I think the thing I like about it is that I can just be at home. I think you have to be a certain type of person to enjoy animation, because I'll be looking at a comp that has thousands of keyframes or something, and I'll be like, oh, how beautiful does it look? But someone else will look at that and be like, that is so stressful, overwhelming. And it is really easy to become overwhelmed by it. One of the things I learned really early on was break it down. You might have a comp that goes for 20 seconds and there might be, 10 to 15 different things that are moving throughout that 20 seconds. Start at the start. What's the first one? Do that. What's the next one? And do it that way. Because if you try and look at it at a whole and try and think about it all at once, you just can't.
Quite overwhelming.
Yeah.
So you mentioned earlier about organization. Do you have any tips that you can share with the audience about how they could organize something so it's clear and helpful for them to not be overwhelmed and full of anxiety?
Yes. So if you're working at a full-time capacity or at a company, the biggest thing I would recommend would be to create a branded asset motion graphics template that has titles, lower thirds, end frames, everything that you will need on a regular basis, so you're not having to create things over and over again.
Can this be done in any program? What program in particular do you use these days?
I use After Effects. It's what I've learnt in. I haven't actually even, at this point in time, even looked at any others. I'm intrigued by Procreate Dreams. I know it's not as advanced as After Effects, but for me, who really loves drawing and especially drawing in Procreate, there's something about it that's really drawing me to it. But I'll see. I've heard it's a little bit glitchy. And to quote Ben Marriott, always label your layers. Even just in the top left, I guess it depends how you top left corner where you've got all your assets and everything, even just putting them into folders, like pre-comps, whatever it is, and the comps, the working comps, label, everything's labeled, everything's clear. Moving more into character animation and things like that, I guess the best example, for me would be like head, eyes, body, right upper arm, left upper arm, all the way down, label everything. And sometimes, color code things too. It's like you might have a comp where for the first third of that comp, all these layers are doing something. And then the next third, it's all these ones. Like literally make them all the same color. So it's really visually easy to, there's a problem with that one. I know that that's in that group of comps, in that group of layers. I'm certainly still learning as well, never ending learning journey, but it makes it a lot easier if you can keep it really clear. This will spark debate. I don't know, but I like to only ever put something into a pre-composition unless I have to. I like to have everything in the one comp so I can see it all. There is occasion where you pre-comp stuff because...
Why?
Sometimes you might have something that's moving and then you need to repeat that thing a whole bunch. In that instance, rather than have, 500 layers, you might have, 5 pre-comps, whatever it is,
Yeah, it just depends on how complex the animation
is.
Yeah. And speaking about never stopping learning, right now you're doing mainly 2D animation, is that correct?
Yeah, 2D animation.
Do you have aspirations for doing 3D?
Look, maybe. I mean, I've seen some that I really like the look of and whatnot, but for me, I've started on this path of 2D character animation and I really want to explore that a lot more. I've gotten pretty good at it, but there's always more to learn. And I've done a number of online courses, and people underestimate the power of YouTube. There is so much you can learn from YouTube, It might sound silly, but my wife's always like, I never really think to go to YouTube to look for something. But for me, my algorithm in YouTube has gotten to a point where it knows what kind of content I like. When I scroll through YouTube, rather than be like, I'm going to watch that now, if I can't, whatever, just go save to watch later, or create a playlist. I've got a playlist, After Effects learning, save it to that playlist. And then when you're bored and you want something to do rather than...
Or when you want to upskill.
Well, yeah. When you want to upskill, rather than sitting and watching Netflix, you could do a little bit of learning. It's great.
I've been doing stuff like that recently just with this podcast, learning about posting shorts on YouTube and stuff that works with the algorithm and all that kind of stuff. So I've found that instead of, watching a Netflix show or whatever at night, I might go on YouTube and then see 5 tips to make your shorts go viral. They haven't worked yet, but maybe one day.
And that's it. It's all about learning. If I try and learn something new every day.
Absolutely, yeah. And for people that are listening right now or watching and they're thinking they want to get into animation but they're not too sure where to start, what would you recommend they do to do that?
Look, I'm a huge advocate of YouTube, 100%. Sometimes the various learning platforms will do, 2 months free or buy a course, get one free. So keep an eye out for deals like that. Otherwise, I'd feel like sometimes they're not hugely expensive, but just literally start with an After Effects fundamentals course. Where you're not learning about any specific one thing, but they'll walk you through a short project, but through that short project, you'll learn a lot of the fundamental concepts of, a foundation, really. And once you wrap your head around it, it's not that difficult. I mean, it can be, obviously, and there's certainly things where I had to do this one animation once where I had icons spinning around in a circle around a center thing, and then there was another set of icons spinning in the opposite direction, but then I wanted lines going from one icon on the outside to an icon on the inside as they were moving, and it was mind-boggling. I actually couldn't even tell you how I did it now, but I had help. So it can be really, really difficult. But in the beginning, the basic concepts, once you wrap your head around them, you can do a lot, maybe more than you might think.
Yeah, I remember the very first time I opened After Effects and thinking, I'm going to make some animation. Where do I start? And it was just so overwhelming. Like it wasn't intuitive to me at the time because I didn't know where to start. I had a Final Cut Pro background, Final Cut Pro 6 at the time. So that's showing my age a little bit. And also I remember just, looking at the whole screen space and just not knowing where to start. And it was video tutorials that really did help me out. And this was at a time where YouTube was in its infancy, I would say. And there was some pretty dry tutorials and pretty, average tutorials. But then I discovered Video Copilot. Yep. And from there, I realized, wow, tutorials can be engaging, helpful, and entertaining as well.
Yeah.
I've fond memories of using Video Copilot and just learning how to, dip my toes into animation with After Effects. Do you have any channels that you go back to and find a lot of value that you could share with our audience right now?
I really like Ben Marriott. I really like his content. I like the way that he delivers it. I like his art, so that's visually it's nice. I consume so much YouTube content that, like apart from him, there's a whole bunch of other people, but they're kind of like, rightly or wrongly, I don't necessarily take notice of who they are. And quite often when I'm in the middle of a project, if there's something that pops up that I'll just like open YouTube and go, how do you do this? And then like watch it and, and I think there's a difference between watching it and doing it. I've like watched something before and done it whilst I'm watching, but then when I get time, I go back and do it again, and do it again without the tutorial. Because like once I can do it without having to refer to something, then I know that it's like it's starting to sink in. And one thing that is probably getting away from starting off in animation, but in my role at that education company, I got to a point where I was actually providing education to the junior editors to help them upskill in After Effects. And like, I think once you can start teaching something, and I was teaching like basic animation stuff, like, but that's when you're like, okay, I really know that I know that now because I can talk about that, to someone and they can understand it. So I did a few courses on motion design school. Yeah, just have a look around and you'll find stuff like, and also even I go to every sort of 3 months there's a motion event that I go to. So meeting other motion designers, other animators, talking to them, a lot of them are like willing to provide advice and insights and things like that. I have a friend, Matt, who he's like so far, up from me, but also just in a different area. And so like, he gives me heaps of advice and stuff. So like if you find people that that are working in this field, ask questions.
Great piece of advice. Always ask questions. Well, Steve, thank you for joining us today and telling us about your animation story.
Thank you for having me. It's good to be here.